Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the conversation around Know the Social Sector. Today, we have Mr. Sriram V. He has been a great leader in the social sector. And today's conversation would be more around career in fundraising and fundraising in the social sector. Welcome, Mr. Sriram.
Thank you, Mana, for having me on your podcast, on a series. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, thank you for joining us. We would like to know more about the Nudge and your work at the Nudge.
Thank you. So, the Nudge Institute is essentially a development action institute that is working towards a poverty-free India within our lifetime. We focus purely on livelihoods, both urban and rural, and we aim to partner with governments, markets, and civil society in order to make sure that resilient livelihoods are built for the poorest. That's essentially our work. So on urban livelihoods, we focus a lot on skill development of youth. On the rural development side, rural livelihood side, we focus on the ultra poor. We do a lot of work on livestock, on goatry and poultry. And the third is we also do work on agriculture for small farmers. Now, under the Center for Social Innovation, which is our third pillar, that is essentially the Center for Social Innovation at the Nudge tries to enable a thriving livelihoods ecosystem by focusing on four vectors: talent, capital, technology, and policy. So that's essentially what we do.
Great. Also in the social sector, those who have been exploring career and you have been into the fundraising. So wanted to know your story also, how this started around fundraising and what's your story?
So I'm an accidental fundraiser. Right? So I did not choose to be a fundraiser. Back in 2011, when I was pursuing my own entrepreneurial journey, I happened to meet Ananta Padmanabhan, who was then the CEO of Amnesty International in India. He was introduced to me by one of our friends, and that was my foray into the development sector. I like solving problems, and it so happened that Amnesty in India was looking at movement building in India and fundraising from people in India in order to support their work in India. So that being the problem statement, I had no background, I had no history. I've never been a salesperson or a business development person or a partnerships person. It was a problem to be solved, and I committed myself to it. But then on, the last 10 years have been an amazing journey of continuous unlearning and continuous learning, both in fundraising from individuals such as you and me, fundraising from corporates in India, and fundraising from foundations, both in India and outside India.
That's very interesting because whenever someone says I'm into fundraising or I want to get into fundraising, there are so many misconceptions that you need to be, having this kind of degrees, you should have this kind of background, and you have certain skill or knowledge, and so many other things. Now, that's where I have a follow-up question, which is, in general, what do you think are the misconceptions around fundraising, or those who want to get into fundraising, the misconception that people have?
I'm not sure I'm very well informed of all the misconceptions, but let me take a stab at it. Fundraising, to my limited knowledge and experience, fundraising is not a very aspirational profession in India. Right? There are not a lot of people in India who aspire to raise money for all the great work that many organizations do in India. Right? Now, when there is no aspiration, then there is not enough quest for information and wanting to know more about it. Right? It has to begin with an aspiration and ambition to invest your time and effort to learn more about fundraising. Perhaps because there is limited aspiration, therefore there are informed opinions to some extent and uninformed opinions to some extent. Right? Now, the misconceptions primarily are that could be that it's extremely difficult to fundraise and it is not easy. there is not enough money for all the great work that is being done in India and maybe even outside India. What is the right strategy to fundraise? So I don't think there are as many misconceptions, Mahala, as much as the lack of know-how. Right? So misconceptions may be very limited, but I believe that while everybody recognizes and acknowledges the importance of fundraising, but how do you approach fundraising? What are some of the things that are required for fundraising is something that I think as a community, we have a lot to learn from each other and also from others.
Right. So those who are watching this conversation, if some of these youth want to start their career in the fundraising, in the social sector, so generally, what are the skill, knowledge, or attitude, or any other thing, say like networking? So what are the required skill or knowledge, or what are the key component that one needs to have when they want to start there, or if they are aspiring to be a fundraiser?
Interestingly, you used three words: attitude, skills, and knowledge. Let me take the same thing. We believe we have a very similar framework at the Nudge as well, not just for fundraising, but for all the roles. Everything, Mahala, begins with an attitude. And what we mean by attitude, this includes even for fundraising, people who are interested in fundraising. Why does one want to be in this sector, right? Why does somebody want to do developmental work? What is their motivation and why do you want to be here is something that needs to be answered very thoughtfully with some time that goes into it. Right? So I call it as intent. What is your intent and what is your reason for that intent to be in the sector, which includes the answer to fundraising as well. Right? The second thing is, are you ready for it? Now, what do I mean by ready is, from an attitudinal standpoint, I think the biggest requirement is a lot of resilience, a lot of inner resilience that sometimes is naturally there in all of us. We are all resilient human beings at some level, but continuous investment in trying to increase your resilience and staying put for the long haul is an attitudinal investment that one must make if they aspire to be great fundraisers in India. The third also is, if you consider fundraising as selling your work, talking about your work, right? You need to be comfortable with failure. When I say resilience, you need to be comfortable with hearing no. You need to be very, very patient. You have to obviously be a people-friendly person, right? You can call it networking, stakeholder management. These are words that we attribute, but fundamentally, do you enjoy being around people?
Mm-hmm.
Do you enjoy reading the room? Right? It's not hearing, but it is active listening. Active listening is also one of the very, very important traits that is required to be a fundraiser. So that's on the attitude part. Mm-hmm. On the smarts, what are the skills required to be there? I think between, let's say, IQ and EQ, at a broad level, I believe EQ is far, far more important than IQ in fundraising, perhaps even in many other roles, right? That's not limited to fundraising. So EQ is extremely important. If not a love affair with numbers, the least that is required is not an aversion to numbers, right? So either you choose something by choice or you eliminate a few things and then you land up in what you actually want to do, right? So if not a love affair, at least an aversion to numbers is something that should not be there.
Right.
Reading the room, like I said, is an essential skill set. How do you navigate conversations and present your story in a short period of time? The operative word here is a short period of time. Therefore, the skill set that I would use is brevity. Us being in the sector, we are all very passionate about our work. We want to talk about problems. We want to solve problems. But with decreasing attention span and limited time available with people,
Right.
exercising brevity is extremely important as well. I think knowledge is something that can be acquired, grown, and learned. I firmly believe that you do not have to be a fundraiser in the past for you to be a great fundraiser in the future. And I will be lying if I say that, because I myself am not one, right? So I firmly believe that one can acquire the skill sets and the knowledge. So that's probably the easy part.
Right. And what you said about brevity and short story about what you do, I mean, that's something that everyone have been also been talking, and every those who are in fundraising, they have also been knowing this wherever they do the storytelling. My follow-up question around this is, there are great organization, and now they nudge work with not-for-profits, CSOs across India. Now, these small organization, grassroots NGOs have been doing a great work, be it on any thematic area they are working in. And they have been, and that's my limited exposure, that they have been struggling, be it language, be it their network, be it finding the right people. So for those organization, what is something that, I mean, you want to share, like what is something that they can work on so that they struggle? Because how do they scale their work that they have been doing while working on the fundraising piece? So if you have any take on that.
So Bharat, the answer is in two parts. One is how does one invest in fundraising? The other one is how do you scale? They are not necessarily dependent on each other. You can scale great models with less money as well. You don't require more money to scale your work. Right? I think on scaling, one of the things that I believe is the real scale of solving a problem, whether it is unemployment, whether it is access to Manrega, right, whether it is access to livelihoods, increase in farmers' income. The scale will come from government and markets. Right? So it's important to then understand what is the role of civil society organizations and what is the role of a non-profit in this particular instance. Is what we believe is, if we are able to prototype and prove that a particular product or a solution or a service is actually achieving the desired impact for your target audience, and if that impact is demonstrated at a critical scale, after that, the ability to work with governments and markets so that you are able to transfer your solution or integrate your solution or weave your design into a government structure, or how do you incentivize markets and remove the barriers if there exists any, so that markets are able to take that solution forward and scale, is the way we look at things. Right? That doesn't require necessarily a lot of money. So prototyping initially to establish a proof of concept and present a very compelling story with evidence is something that needs to be accepted. Everything is a journey, much like a startup. We were no exception there. But therefore, the importance of risk capital, failure capital, patient capital becomes extremely important for big or small organizations to invest in, so that they are able to set themselves up for success. Okay. Now, with particular reference to small organizations, I think small, medium, or big, one of the things is to consciously, deliberately prioritize fundraising as an important organizational function. Right? It needs to be called out in as many words, and it is not a support function. That's number one. This may sound like a borderline cliche, but it needs to be translated into active practice. Right? That's one. Once it is called out as an important function, then there needs to be investments that go in the direction. Right? Investments in building a team, investments in tools that are essential for fundraising, investment in learning and development that equips the team to learn and do better, investments in failing. Right? Results are not going to come in 1 or 2 months or 3 months. So a bit of patience in expecting the results is important. The leadership of an organization, their time involvement in actively solving for fundraising is important as well. So these are very essential things, which sometimes takes a backseat, right? Either consciously or unconsciously. Right? There is also a fear of the unknown, right? If I have to make an investment, should I make this investment? Will this investment reap a benefit or not? What if it fails? What will I answer to my donor?
Right.
I think these are very real questions, but it's up to the organization to convince a strategically aligned, a mission aligned donor to. It's important to find mission aligned partners, donor partners who believe in building organizational capacity and capability in order to grow further, for which fundraising is one of the essential aspects. So that prioritization, it begins with that, and then resourcing in terms of staff and tools and support and some other things, and being able to experiment with things that may be unknowns today, but that effort is important to sort of persist there.
The misconception that I had is, and then so many people around me also have been talking about scale and depth, and maybe what you said around skill doesn't always need money, or the second you spoke about sustainability. So I think these and investment into fundraising, building the team, etc., are really great thing, and that's something that sometime in is it something could be a area that organizations should put. And I have another thought around now. In the last 11 years, when you see your journey in the ecosystem, there are so many changes happen. There are things evolving. So do you see any trend around fundraising? Technology is evolving. There are digital platforms for fundraising. So, and then there are so many other trends also. So do you want to share some of insights around that as well?
So, Maharal, let me call this out upfront, right? India is not a poor country, right? India is a fairly rich country. There are a lot of Indians who are rich. The unfortunate reality is that there are far more Indians who are poorer, right? So availability of financial capital or money is not the problem statement. The ability to access that money is sort of the problem statement, right? So I just wanted to call out that. Yes, you're right that there are so many avenues. I mean, India is the second country in the world, and only the second country in the world to have CSR, right? And that's annual available funds of about north of 50,000 crores. Right? Yes, a large chunk of it comes from public sector organizations. Even if you discount about 25,000 crores of public sector undertakings, which is also substantial investment, there is still 30,000 crores that is available for non-profit organizations to raise funding from. So, and that is B2B fundraising. So you're raising money from a business or an institution, or some people call it institutional fundraise. Some people say B2B fundraise. Let's not get trapped in semantics, but that is a large piece of funding that is available, and it's only a 10-year-old ecosystem. The law came into effect in 2013.
Right.
Corporates in India have also evolved in how they think about CSR. What do they prioritize on CSR? How would they like to construct partnerships with non-profits towards achieving the SDGs or their own social impact goals? So I think as the CSR market continues to grow and continues to evolve, both in thinking and in funding, it's also important for non-profits to develop a muscle and invest in people who understand this B2B approach of raising funding from corporates. Right? If you look at earlier organizations, which are maybe 17, 20 years old, they may have had to make a fresh investment in learning about how to raise money from corporate. So there is a slight learning curve there. All right. We were in that sense a little fortunate because we started the nudge in 2015. So the CSR law was already in place. Right. So from day one, we were conscious of the fact that this is a source of funding and we need to prioritize and invest in that. Similarly, the same approach lies with foundations in India and outside of India, and there are plenty of them. Right? When we look at fundraising from individuals like yourself and myself, and certain high net worth individuals or ultra high net worth individuals, particularly in India, with increasing wealth among Indians, that is also a largely untapped market. Also coupled with a genuine intent of people to give back. Right? So people want to give back, but then questions of credibility, trust, transparency, accountability, all of these things needs to be cemented if you have to raise money. So the infrastructure of how are you going to serve the mandate of transparency, how are you going to build trust, those things become very fundamental, important core questions to be answered initially. Yes, there are a lot of digital, for example, there is immense growth in retail fundraising. I still believe it is nascent in India, and the potential of retail fundraising purely in an online fashion. So I'm not talking about telemarketing or face-to-face fundraising, which are obviously still continued. But the future, in some sense, lies in digital fundraising, a subset of which is crowdfunding. So you have multiple platforms like Keto, like Mila, many other organizations where you can raise money from your friends and family.
Right.
So obviously the fintech space, the payment gateways, those are very standard off-the-shelf solutions that you can just plug in and play in order to raise money from individuals. But I still believe the retail fundraising, particularly digital fundraising, is still a nascent market with a lot of potential to grow, especially in India. And just to add one more data point, if you look at many nonprofits in the world, the real spurt in growth, right? Let's say you keep raising money year after year, but the real inflection point or the spurt in growth has invariably always come from individual fundraising. I mean, India has 1 billion people. So you can raise money from Indians, but raising money online is still nascent, but it's a huge greenfield or whitefield space for organizations to think about deeply and invest in. And of course, like you mentioned, there are currently available enough tools. And also, I think that the room for innovation, the room for creating new products is something that is very wide open with the introduction of, let's say, checkout charity, which has been there for a while now. Whether you talk about Book Smile or Flipkart, there are checkout charities, there are NFTs now. Then there is crypto, which became very popular during, as in COVID. So there are auctions, there are galas. So there are multiple avenues and channels, but it's up to what an organization wants to prioritize and where they have access to.
Right. These numbers and these insights and the conversation that we're having with you definitely helping us understand more in-depth insights about fundraising. There are youth also who are watching this conversation. And if they want to start their career in fundraising, if you look at your journey starting and now, and if one advice you would like to give them, those who want to start their career in fundraising or in social sector, what one advice would you like to give them?
Focus on learning. Be very invested in learning, and rapid learning, accelerated learning, and the rest will fall in place.
Great. Very one-liner, but very insightful and helpful, Sriram. Sriram, any other message that you wanted to say with not-for-profits, those who are struggling with fundraising or want to build their teams, like you said, or want to invest into fundraising? Any message that you wanted to give to them as well?
I think one of the things is to, if you look at the talent pool available for fundraising, Right? There are about 3 million registered non-profits in India, which you are aware of. Right? But if you look at, are there enough fundraisers in India who can actually go and raise money? Obviously, there is a huge gap between what the demand is and what the supply is. So I think as a community, as a fraternity, we should make fundraising for developmental work primarily an aspirational choice among the youth. Right? Your premise was that for any aspiring youth, what should they do? But my problem statement, I will flip it and say, Mahala, first we need to build that aspiration. It's our responsibility to build that aspiration. If the aspiration is built, I think there are enough number of creative, energetic, talented young people in India who could be very well interested in fundraising. So that's something that I would say. So as a community, one of the things that I would like to see in the coming years is how do you make fundraising an aspirational career choice among young people in order to do developmental work?
Right. And that's a big statement for those who are watching and maybe building institutions or running institutions which help or build talent for the sector. Definitely, this is something that the area and the opportunity for all of us. Thank you, Sriram, for joining us for this small conversation. We look to have you again to have similar conversation and follow-up questions from the listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mala.